So, what do you get when beloved, brutally honest, recently retired NFL legend casually eviscerates your entire franchise on national media? Well, if you're the Cleveland Browns, you get chaos, headlines, and one very angry billionaire owner blowing a gasket behind closed doors. Let's set the scene. The Browns are already wobbling on shaky legs. Injuries, quarterback drama, cap nightmares as usual. But then Jason Kelce decided to say the quiet part loud. The Super Bowl champ, future Hall of Famer and locker room philosopher took a look at Cleveland's strategy. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Their Deshaun Watson situation, their backup plans or lack thereof, and the whole operation, and basically went, yeah, this house is built on sand and the tide's coming in fast. And the kicker? Everyone kind of agreed. Players, fans, analysts. Nobody rushed to defend Cleveland. Instead, they leaned in, nodded, and said, yeah, Kelce's got a point. Except Jimmy Haslam. Oh no, the Browns owner did not take that well. And when we say didn't take it well, we're talking about late-night meetings, frantic media spin, whispered frustrations inside the building. Haslam wasn't just annoyed, he was personally offended. Because Jason Kelce didn't just critique a play call or missed draft pick. He went for the Brown soul. And the thing is, he wasn't wrong. Kelce's comments weren't mean-spirited. They were just true. And that's what made them hit so hard. Because he didn't say the Browns suck. He said, the Browns are vulnerable, top to bottom, structurally, strategically, philosophically. And when someone like Jason Kelce, who knows what a Super Bowl locker room feels like, who's seen elite QB play, who's protected MVPs and played under real leadership, calls your franchise unstable. It's not trash talk. It's a diagnosis. Let's dig into what Kelce actually said, because his words are still reverberating through Cleveland like a fourth-quarter pick-six. He called out the quarterback room. He questioned the wisdom of putting this much of the franchise's future in the brittle hands of Deshaun Watson, a player whose guaranteed $230 million contract now hangs over Browns like a fog they can't escape. He questioned the offensive line's protection, or lack thereof. And most damning of all, he suggested that the Browns have built a roster that simply can't withstand the rigors of the AFC North. And if you watch a single Browns game this year, is he wrong? You got Joe Flacco, drag out retirement, and somehow looking more poised and productive than the guy who's soaking up nearly $250 million. You got Deshaun Watson, once touted as a franchise savior, now hobbling between injuries, inconsistent performances, and awkward press conferences that do nothing to reassure fans he's a guy. And behind them, a QB room held together with chewing gum and vibes. Kelce wasn't just throwing shade. He was sounding the alarm. And the truth is, this team should be worried. Because when your entire salary cap is wrapped up in a quarterback who hasn't played a full elite-level season since 2020, you better have a backup plan. When your offensive line is leaking pressure, like a sieve, you better have a contingency strategy. But the Browns? They've got neither. They're flying blind. And everyone knows it, including the locker room. Sources have already hinted that certain players are quietly frustrated with how the quarterback situation is being handled. There's a real sense of disconnect between what the coaching staff wants to do and what ownership is forcing them to do. Because Jimmy Haslam, he's still clinging to the Deshaun Watson dream, still betting that, eventually, the noise will fade and the investment will pay off. But football doesn't work like that. Hope is not a strategy. And while Haslam fumes over Kelce's criticism, the rest of the league is watching the Browns spiral again. Same story, different year. High hopes, expensive roster, weird decisions, quarterback disaster. But this year's dysfunction feels different, heavier, because the Watson contract isn't just a bad look. It's a franchise-altering anchor. That $230 million guarantee is uncharted territory. It's not just expensive, it's crippling. It limits who the team can sign, how they can restructure, and how they can build around a player who hasn't looked anything close to elite. And when Jason Kelce called that out, it stung, because he's not a media guy. He's not chasing clicks or trying to go viral. He's a guy who built his career in the trenches. He knows what a winning organization looks like, and he's saying this isn't it. And fans? Oh, they felt that. Because as much as Cleveland fans ride or die with their team, even they're tired. Tired of the spin. Tired of the false starts. Tired of being told to trust the process, when the process looks like chaos in slow motion. Kelce gave them a voice. He said what they've been thinking. And that's what really set Haslam off. Because it's one thing to be criticized by national media. It's another to have one of the league's most respected veterans peel back the curtain and tell everyone your foundation is cracked. But maybe the wildest part of all this? Kelce isn't even on a team anymore. He's not playing. He's not competing against the Browns. He has zero incentive to stir the pot. And yet, he still felt compelled to say something. That's how clear the problems are. Let's not forget, this is a team with one of the best defenses in the league. Myles Garrett is doing everything. They've got talent at wide receiver. A solid, on paper, offensive line. They should be contending. But in the NFL, none of that matters without a quarterback. And right now, the Browns don't have one they can trust. Watson's availability is always in question. Flacco is playing admirably, but he's not the future. And behind them, no one's pushing for the job. And yet, money talks. And right now, Deshaun Watson's contract is screaming so loud that it's drowning out logic. That's what Kelce was warning against. Because in a division where every other team has a clear QB identity, Burrow in Cincinnati, Lamar in Baltimore, even the Steelers figuring it out with Pickett, the Browns are still asking themselves the most basic question. Who are we? Not just at quarterback, as a team, as an organization. And until they answer that, it's going to be more of the same. And if the early season struggles continue, if Watson doesn't magically transform back into his 2020 self, if the offense keeps sputtering and the locker room starts fracturing, just know this. Jason Kelce saw it coming. He tried to tell them. And instead of listening, they lashed out. So here we are, a Browns team teetering on the edge, a fan base waiting for the inevitable letdown, a quarterback room in crisis, and an owner more concerned with optics than outcomes. And in the background, Jason Kelce, probably sitting on a podcast mic somewhere, sipping something cold, watching the fallout with that same smirk he wore after every Eagles win. Because the Browns didn't need another motivational speech. They needed a reality check, and Kelce gave it to them. The question is, will they finally wake up? Or is this just the start of another all-too-familiar Cleveland collapse? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Kelce out of line, or just brutally honest? Can the Browns recover, or is this another season already slipping through their fingers? Hit subscribe for more insider drama, raw takes, and the meltdowns you didn't see coming. Because in Cleveland, the QB carousel never stops turning, and the next spin could be the one that breaks it all apart. All right, strap in, because if you thought Jason Kelce's mic drop was the climax of this Brown saga, think again. We are officially deep into meltdown territory, and the temperature inside the Cleveland Browns facility? Boiling. Let's just paint the picture here. A recently retired future Hall of Famer goes on a national platform and, with surgical precision, calls your team fragile, unstable, and possibly one key injury away from falling off a cliff. It wasn't personal. It wasn't emotional. It was worse. It was factual. And the Browns' response? Not reflection. Not acknowledgement. Not a well-crafted PR statement. No, they went into full defensive panic mode. Owner Jimmy Haslam didn't just hear Kelce's comments. He internalized them, turned them into a vendetta. It wasn't about the critique. It was about the audacity of someone outside the building pointing out what everyone inside has been whispering for months. Because here's the uncomfortable truth Jimmy doesn't want to hear. Jason Kelce didn't expose a secret. He confirmed the suspicion. The house is already burning. And Kelce just walked by, sniffed the air, and said, "Hey, you know there's smoke coming out of the windows, right?" Let's talk about why his words hit such a nerve, especially right now. The Browns are in the middle of a foundational identity crisis. They've got one of the league's most dominant defenses, top 5 in nearly every category, and a unit that has single-handedly kept the season alive on more than one occasion. But the offense The offense is a house of cards. And Deshaun Watson? He was supposed to be the architect who rebuilt this franchise from scratch. Instead, he's been invisible. And that's not an exaggeration. Between injuries, inconsistent play, and the crushing weight of his fully guaranteed $230 million contract, Watson has become the central issue in Cleveland, whether Haslam wants to admit it or not. Here's the thing. Watson's contract isn't just a bad investment. It's a trapdoor. It locks the Browns out of flexibility. It hampers their ability to sign free agents, retain core players, or even pivot when things aren't working. It's a financial straitjacket, and the escape clause doesn't exist. So when Kelce brings that up on national TV, no less, you'd think maybe someone in the organization would take a breath and say, all right, maybe we do need to rethink our strategy. But nope. Haslam's camp reportedly started calling around, trying to correct the record, insisting Kelce didn't understand the full context of what's happening in Cleveland. Let's unpack that. Jason Kelce has played against the Browns. He's studied their defense. He's played with elite quarterbacks. He's protected MVPs. He's been inside a winning culture, a Super Bowl locker room, and survived some of the nastiest O-line trenches in the game. He absolutely understands the context. He just doesn't buy the excuses. And neither should we, because while the Browns spin their wheels trying to control the optics, the problems are compounding by the week. Let's talk about this offensive line for a second. Once considered the heart of the team, tough, reliable, physical, it's now a mess. Injuries have decimated the depth chart. Assignments are being missed. Protection is breaking down faster than a TikTok trend. And Watson? Even when he's healthy, he's skittish, holding onto the ball too long, missing reads, and looking like a player still trying to shake off 2 years of rust. And guess what? You can't shake that kind of rust in the AFC North. This division eats quarterbacks alive. Lamar Jackson is playing lights out. Joe Burrow, despite injuries, still terrifies defensive coordinators. Even the Steelers, with all their flaws, know exactly who they are and have a system to support their QB. Cleveland? They're still guessing. Still juggling between a backup savior and Joe Flacco. Yes, Joe Flacco. And praying that Watson eventually turns into the player they thought they were getting. But every game that passes without that transformation, the pressure builds. And Kelce's commentary starts to look less like criticism and more like prophecy. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room. The fan base agrees with Kelce. You don't see Twitter/X blowing up defending Haslam. You don't hear diehard Dog Pound fans saying, hey, Jason was too harsh. Nope. If anything, they're grateful someone finally said it with their chest. Because Browns fans aren't dumb. They've been here before. They've seen the signs. And while they were hoping this season would be different, Kelce just confirmed what's been gnawing at them from the start. This team is built on contradictions. A win-now roster with a quarterback who needs time. A defensive unit worthy of the postseason, shackled to an offense stuck in neutral. An owner who spends big, but doesn't want to hear the consequences when those big bets backfire. So when Kelce gets attacked for pointing it out, when Haslam bristles and sends his PR machine into overdrive, it just reinforces the core problem. They're not listening. Not to the fans. Not to former players. Not even to the film. They're trying to protect the narrative, not fix the roster. And that right there is the scariest part of all. Because this Browns team still has a chance. That's the tragic irony here. The defense is good enough to keep them competitive. They've got weapons on offense. They've got a few more games to turn the season around. But with every week spent chasing ghosts, hoping Watson suddenly morphs into 2020 Watson, those chances are slipping. This team doesn't need a hero. It needs clarity. It needs someone in leadership, anyone, to stand up and say, what we're doing isn't working. But instead, they lashed out at a retired center. And let's be honest, Jason Kelce is probably somewhere laughing. Not because he wanted to start a feud, but because he knew the reaction would prove his point. You can't fix problems you won't admit exist. So now, the Browns are in this weird limbo. Too talented to tank. Too fragile to contend. Too expensive to pivot. Too proud to rebuild. And still too sensitive to hear the truth. The Kelce moment was never about drama. It was about exposure. And the Browns' reaction to that exposure tells you everything you need to know about where they are. Lost, defensive, cornered. And unless something changes fast, unless someone in that building grows a spine and starts making hard, smart calls, they're not going to find their way out of this spiral. Because football, at the end of the day, doesn't care about reputations. It doesn't care about contracts. It doesn't care how much your owner paid for your quarterback. It cares about wins. And right now, the Browns are running out of them. So tell us in the comments, was Jason Kelce out of bounds, or did he just say what everyone else was too scared to admit? Should the Browns double down on Watson, or start looking for their next answer now? Subscribe for more raw takes, behind-the-scenes drama, and football's wildest meltdowns. Because this story, it's far from over. And if the Browns keep ignoring the smoke, they better get ready for flames. You still with me? Good, because this Browns saga is far from cooling down. In fact, if you're a Cleveland fan, you might want to take a walk. Maybe pour a stiff drink. Because the deeper we dig into this mess, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a bad year. It's a cautionary tale, one that's unfolding in real time. Let's go back to where it really all unraveled, the Deshaun Watson deal. Now, at the time, it was pitched as bold, aggressive, a win-now move for a win-star franchise. But hindsight has a funny way of clearing up the fog. And right now, the Watson contract isn't just an albatross. It's a full-blown organizational catastrophe. $230 million. Fully guaranteed. Let that sit. It was the kind of deal that sent shockwaves through the league. Not because of the talent. Watson was elite in Houston. No one's denying that. But because of the risk, the baggage, the time off, and now the consequences. This contract didn't just throw off the Browns' balance sheet. It destabilized the entire culture. Every player in that locker room knows what he's making. Every time he underperforms, it doesn't just sting, it alienates. Because how do you build a team-first mentality when your highest-paid player isn't producing, isn't healthy, and might not be fixable? This is what Jason Kelce was getting at. He wasn't just taking aim at Watson. He was questioning the structure, the thinking, the idea that you can buy your way out of dysfunction without changing anything underneath. And it's not just the quarterback. It's the ripple effect. That contract, it's hamstrung the Browns' ability to build a sustainable roster. They can't spend freely. They can't extend everyone they want to. They can't make bold mid-season moves to patch up problems. They're locked into a timeline that may not match up with reality. And they're starting to realize it too late. But the worst part, they're still pretending it's fine. Every press conference is a masterclass in denial. Stefanski carefully dances around the topic. Haslam avoids media altogether unless it's damage control. And Watson himself, when he's not mysteriously sidelined, is vague, guarded, almost disconnected from the urgency around him. Meanwhile, Joe Flacco, a man who was golfing this time last year, is somehow the most competent quarterback on the roster. And this isn't meant to slander Flacco. He's been a stabilizing presence. But let's not pretend that a 39-year-old journeyman outplaying a 9-figure franchise QB isn't a red flag the size of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That alone should have triggered internal alarms. But it didn't, or at least not publicly, because the Browns don't want to admit the truth that Kelce laid bare. This team is built on a gamble that isn't paying off. And that gamble isn't just holding them back. It's eroding what little credibility they had finally started to build. Remember last season? There was a flicker of hope. A defense that could punch you in the mouth. A coach who seemed like he was settling in. A roster that, while imperfect, felt like it had pieces. Fans weren't dreaming of Super Bowl parades. But maybe, just maybe, a wild card berth? A late season push? Then the Watson saga dragged on. The offense never clicked. The injuries piled up. And suddenly, it wasn't a playoff team. It was a crisis team. So when Kelce said what he said, it hit different. It didn't feel like an outsider throwing stones. It felt like a veteran player seeing all the familiar signs of a franchise on the brink and calling it out before it imploded. And maybe that's why Haslam snapped. Because deep down, even he knows Kelce was right. But here's where things really start to get tragic. Because even if the Browns somehow pull off a miracle and sneak into playoff contention, what then? Are you going to ride a 40-year-old Flacco into next season? Hand the reins back to a shaky Watson and just hope for the best? Burn another draft year without a clear QB plan? Pretend that all this dysfunction is just bad luck? Because let's be brutally honest, there's no clean way out of this. They can't trade Watson. Nobody's taking that contract. They can't bench him long-term because then they're paying $250 million for a clipboard holder. They can't build around him because they've already spent the resources they needed to make that work. They're stuck, not just financially, culturally, strategically, and it's seeping into every layer of the franchise. You've got players playing tight, coaches second-guessing every call, fans already looking ahead to the next draft, wondering how the team can possibly retool without any real flexibility. And the worst part? The AFC North is only getting tougher. The Ravens aren't going anywhere. The Bengals will be back to full strength. The Steelers, well, they're the Steelers. You know they'll find a way to be annoying and competitive. The Browns? They're hoping lightning strikes twice, that a backup-turned-savior can carry them through a war zone of a division, that Deshaun Watson's body and confidence will magically snap back into form, that their owner won't keep micromanaging from the top while ignoring the cracks forming underneath. That's not a strategy. That's wishful thinking dressed up in a brown and orange hoodie. So what now? Honestly, it's time for the Browns to stop trying to silence their critics and start listening to them. Jason Kelce didn't light a fire. He found one. And instead of grabbing a hose, the Browns poured gasoline on it by lashing out instead of reflecting. This team doesn't need another press conference. They need a reset. And that starts with accountability, not just from the coaching staff, but from the very top. Haslam has to stop pretending the Watson deal was a stroke of genius and accept that it's a gamble gone wrong. Stefanski has to stop coaching scared. And Watson, he has to show up. Not just physically, but emotionally. He has to want to be the guy again. Right now, he's collecting checks and offering excuses. That's not leadership. That's erosion. And if something doesn't change soon, this won't just be another lost season. It'll be the moment the Browns finally prove what everyone outside Cleveland has been saying for years. That no matter the roster, the hype, or the headlines, the dysfunction always finds a way back in. So go ahead, Jimmy. Get mad at Jason Kelce. Call it unfair. Call it unprofessional. But before you do, ask yourself one thing. What if he was just the first person brave enough to say what your own players are too scared to? That's your real problem. And if you don't face it, the meltdown won't stop with a few spicy headlines. It'll be your legacy.